Have you ever wondered why menopause can suddenly make you feel like a different person? One minute you're coping just fine, and the next you're lying awake at 3 o'clock in the morning with your mind racing, feeling anxious for no obvious reason, snapping at the people you love, bursting into tears over something that normally wouldn't bother you. If that sounds familiar, I want to reassure you of one thing straight away. You're not imagining it. There is a very real reason you're feeling this way, and once you understand what's happening, it all begins to make sense. Hi, I'm Rachel, a naturopath who specializes in hormones. Welcome to her Hormone IQ, where I explain hormones simply. Today, I'll be walking you through how changing hormone levels affect your brain and nervous system, why stress suddenly feels so much harder to cope with during menopause, and the 5 strategies I use most often in clinical practice to help women feel calmer, more resilient, and more like themselves again. As always, treatment should be individualized. The information I share today is for educational purposes only and isn't a substitute for personalized medical advice. If you're concerned about your symptoms or are considering changes to your medications or supplements, please speak with your healthcare professional. So let's begin by looking at what's happening inside your brain. One of the biggest misconceptions about menopause is that hormones only affect your reproductive system. In reality, hormones are your body's chemical messengers. Think of them as thousands of tiny text messages traveling around your body every day, carrying instructions from one part of the body to another, and one of the busiest destinations is your brain. Estrogen and progesterone help regulate many of your brain's most important functions. They influence your mood, sleep, memory, concentration, motivation, and even the way your body responds to stress. For most of your adult life, your brain has relied on these hormone messages every single day. Then, during perimenopause, those messages become much less predictable. Some days there's plenty of estrogen, some days much less. Some months you ovulate, other months you don't. It's a bit like trying to have a conversation when the phone signal keeps dropping in and out. Sometimes the message gets through, sometimes it doesn't. Your brain is suddenly trying to adapt to a very different pattern of communication. And that's why so many women suddenly feel unlike themselves. One of the first hormones to begin declining during perimenopause is progesterone. That's because ovulation becomes less regular. I like to think of progesterone as one of your body's natural calming hormones. One of the ways it does this is by supporting a calming chemical in the brain called GABA. Think of GABA as your brain's brake pedal. Every day, your brain balances an accelerator and a brake. The accelerator keeps you alert, motivated, and ready to respond when you need to. The brake helps you slow down, relax, switch off, and sleep. Progesterone helps that brake work more effectively. So, as progesterone levels begin to fall, it's a bit like the brake becoming less responsive. Your brain can begin to feel as though it's always running just a little too fast. That's why many women begin noticing anxiety, difficulty switching off at night, lighter sleep, irritability, feeling wired yet exhausted, and finding everyday stress much harder to cope with. But progesterone is only part of the story. Estrogen also plays a vital role in keeping your brain functioning at its best. I like to think of estrogen as your brain's support team. It helps your brain produce and use important chemical messengers such as serotonin, dopamine, and noradrenaline. These chemicals influence your mood, motivation, concentration, memory, and your ability to cope with stress. Estrogen also helps brain cells communicate efficiently with one another. So, as estrogen levels begin fluctuating during perimenopause, it's not surprising that many women notice brain fog, forgetfulness, difficulty concentrating, lower mood, reduced resilience, and increased anxiety. Here's another way to think about it. Imagine your nervous system is like the suspension on a car. When the suspension is working well, you still drive over bumps in the road, but they're absorbed smoothly. Estrogen and progesterone help provide some of that cushioning. As hormone levels become less predictable, that cushioning becomes less reliable. The bumps in life haven't changed, but suddenly you feel every single one. It's not because you've become weaker, it's because your brain is adapting to a completely new hormonal environment. So what happens when everyday stress is added on top? Whenever your brain senses a threat, it activates your stress response and releases the hormone cortisol. Cortisol isn't the enemy. In fact, we couldn't live without it. It helps us wake up, stay alert, and respond to challenges. The problem isn't cortisol itself. The problem is when your body feels as though it's under stress all the time. Think of your nervous system like a smoke alarm. A smoke alarm is designed to warn you when there's a real fire. But if it becomes too sensitive, it starts going off every time you cook. That's a little like what can happen during menopause. As hormone levels fluctuate, your nervous system becomes more sensitive to everyday stress, spending more time in fight or flight mode. That's why so many women say, "I just can't cope with stress the way I used to." The important thing to remember is this: feeling anxious, overwhelmed, or like you're no longer coping isn't a sign of weakness. It's a very real response to changing hormones, affecting the way your brain and nervous system respond to stress. The encouraging news is that your nervous system is remarkably adaptable. While we can't stop the hormonal changes of menopause, we can do a great deal to support it through this transition. In my clinical experience, the women who do best don't rely on a single supplement or quick fix. Instead, they take a whole-body approach by supporting their nutrition, movement, sleep, stress response, and, when appropriate, using carefully selected herbs and nutrients. So let me show you the 5 strategies I use most often in clinical practice. If there was one place I'd start with almost every woman experiencing menopause anxiety, it would be the kitchen. Your brain relies on a steady supply of glucose to function at its best. When your blood sugar drops too low, your body treats it as an emergency and releases stress hormones like adrenaline and cortisol. That's why low blood sugar can leave you feeling shaky, anxious, irritable, lightheaded, or craving something sweet. Many women think they're feeling stressed, when in reality it's their blood sugar triggering their stress response. One of the first things I focus on with my patients is creating steadier blood sugar throughout the day. For most women, that means including protein with every meal, eating plenty of colourful vegetables, adding healthy fats, reducing added sugars, limiting alcohol, and cutting back on excess caffeine if they're already feeling anxious or wired. I'll be taking you through my complete menopause nutrition plan in a future video where I'll show you exactly how I use blood sugar regulation together with an anti-inflammatory approach to nutrition to support hormones, reduce inflammation, improve energy and mood, and help women feel their best through menopause. For today, just remember this: the goal isn't perfection. It's giving your brain a steady supply of fuel and reducing unnecessary stress on your nervous system. Every time you stabilize your blood sugar, you're sending your brain one important message: you're safe. The second strategy I always use with my patients is supporting the body's stress response. When appropriate, this is where herbs and key nutrients can be incredibly helpful. One of the herbs I commonly use in clinical practice, when it's appropriate for the individual, is ashwagandha. Ashwagandha belongs to a special group of herbs called adaptogens. I like to think of adaptogens as personal trainers for your stress response. They don't switch your stress response off because we still need it. Life will always have its challenges. Instead, they help your body respond to stress in a healthier, more balanced way. One of the biggest lessons I've learnt from working with women over the years is that the most effective approach isn't always treating each symptom individually. Instead of chasing hot flushes, anxiety, poor sleep, or low mood one by one, I focus on building a stronger, more resilient nervous system. When women begin sleeping better, feeling calmer, and coping with everyday stress more easily, I often find that many of their menopausal symptoms begin improving at the same time. That's why supporting the stress response has become one of my favorite clinical approaches. Depending on the individual, I may also recommend nutrients such as magnesium to support healthy nerve function, relaxation, and restful sleep, or an activated B complex to support energy production, neurotransmitter synthesis, and healthy nervous system function. Of course, herbs and supplements aren't magic solutions. They work best alongside good nutrition, regular movement, quality sleep, stable blood sugar, and effective stress management. Think of them as another member of your support team. They're there to support healthy habits, not replace them. One of the most powerful ways to support your nervous system doesn't come from a bottle. My third key strategy comes from creating moments throughout the day where your brain receives one simple message: you're safe. Many women spend years living in survival mode, juggling work, family, relationships, and countless responsibilities. Their nervous system rarely gets the chance to switch off. That's why it's so important to intentionally create moments of rest. For some women, that might be a walk in nature. For others, it could be strength training, yoga, meditation, deep breathing, stretching, reading a book, or simply sitting quietly with a cup of tea. The activity itself isn't the most important part. The consistency is. Even 10 or 20 minutes each day can help move your nervous system out of fight or flight mode and back into rest, repair, and recovery. My fourth tip is to make sleep a priority. Sleep is when your brain and nervous system repair, reset, and prepare for the next day. It's also when your brain becomes better equipped to cope with stress. When sleep is poor, anxiety often feels worse, resilience becomes lower, and even everyday challenges can feel overwhelming. I'll be doing a dedicated video on improving sleep during menopause because it's one of the most common concerns I see in clinical practice. My fifth and final tip is simply this: be kind to yourself. Menopause often reminds us that we can't keep living exactly as we did in our 20s and expect our bodies to respond the same way. Ask yourself, what can I simplify? What can I let go of? Where can I say no without feeling guilty? Who could I ask for help? Sometimes the most powerful treatment isn't adding something else. It's creating a little more space to breathe. Today we've learnt that many of the emotional symptoms of menopause aren't just in your head. They're a very real and very normal response to changing hormones affecting your brain and nervous system. The encouraging news is that there is so much you can do to support yourself through this transition. Remember the 5 strategies we talked about today. Keep your blood sugar steady. Support your stress response. Reset your nervous system every day. Prioritize sleep. Lighten the load and be kind to yourself. Each of these strategies sends your brain the same reassuring message: you're safe. And when your brain feels safe, it becomes much easier for your nervous system to move out of fight or flight mode and back into rest, repair, and recovery. That's where resilience begins. That's where healing begins. And that's where many women begin to feel like themselves again. Thank you for watching. I'm Rachel, a naturopath who specializes in women's hormones. If you found this video helpful, I'd love for you to subscribe to Her Hormone IQ, where I simplify the science of hormones and share practical, evidence-informed strategies to help you feel your best through every stage of life. Until next time, remember, when you understand your hormones, you understand your health.